So these are stainless steel versions. Most people go with stainless steel. It's just, again, more efficient. Copper is more expensive, but it imparts a different flavor. So again, different decisions will impact the ultimate recipe and the flavor profile of whatever tequila you're looking to create. So now you have tequila, you run it through the distillation process 2 times. You have actual tequila, you have your blanco. You need to turn it into reposado, añejo, extra añejo. In order to create a reposado, you need to age it for a minimum of 2 months to a year. To create an añejo, it's got to be minimum 1 year. It can go all the way up to 3 years. And extra añejo is anything beyond 3 years. This picture I took at the Jose Cuervo distillery. So again, decisions on the brand's part. You can do a light char, you can do a medium char, or you can do a heavy char. And depending on how much char is on that wood barrel, that's ultimately going to impact the taste of the tequila that's inside of it. Some brands purposely like to use extremely exhausted barrels because they don't want the wood to kind of influence the final flavor profile of the tequila. One brand that I can think of is Ocho. Ocho plays heavily on the term of terroir, which we see in wine, right? The concept that if you take 2 sets of grapes, the exact same grapes, you grow them in 2 different areas, Napa versus Sonoma, it's going to taste radically different because the soil, the altitude, the wind, the rain, shade, etc. The soil itself will impact the way that it tastes. And so brands like Ocho purposely do that. They want the most exhausted barrels that are near the end of their life. They don't want a lot of wood in their tequila. Again, a decision. Here is a picture that I took. It's kind of hard to see. Here's basically the level where the alcohol is. So you lose a lot of the alcohol over time. They call it the angel share. Due to basically evaporation, over time you will lose some of your tequila, which again, if you're losing some of your products and you're doing an añejo or an extra añejo, that will influence price as well. I included this picture just to give you guys an idea of just how extremely regulated tequila is. The CRT comes out to the factories essentially every day to make sure that they're following the proper rules, they're doing what they say they're supposed to do, and they're not doing anything issued out of the ordinary. It's an extremely controlled industry. So now we shift into Mezcal. The process is very similar, but the way they're done is extremely different. Sorry, did you have a question? I'll let you raise your hand. No? So unlike tequila, tequila can be made in 5 states. Mezcal now can be produced in 9 states. The newest addition is actually the state of Puebla. One of the main differences between tequila and mezcal is with tequila you can only use one very specific species of agave called the blue Weber agave. The reasons why that happened, who influenced that, is a different story altogether. But it's a blue Weber agave you have to use in order to make tequila. In mezcal, it's different. In Mexico, there's approximately 130 species of agaves, a lot of different kinds. Of those, about 29 have the necessary sugar content to turn that agave into alcohol. A lot of them just don't have the necessary amount of sugar to be able to create a spirit. Oaxaca has an extremely high level of diversity with the agave plants, and that has a lot to do with why Oaxaca is so closely associated with mezcal. I like to use wine a lot. Clearly Napa is extremely famous for wine, but everybody knows there's a lot of different regions that you can go to and have phenomenal wine. Monterey, the Central Coast, the Central Valley, Lodi, Sonoma, etc. Right? But Napa is for the most part closely associated with wine. And a big reason why Oaxaca is associated with mezcal so much is because they simply have a very high diversity. About 23 of the 29 species that you can turn into mezcal are readily available in Oaxaca. So we notice these plants are much, much smaller, and they look different than the blue Weber agave. The blue Weber agave is basically the size of an adult, really straight, spiky leaves. This is right outside of Puebla. Actually, this is in Puebla. So here, some animals that are just cruising by, and this will give you an idea of the size. And the shape of the leaves is completely different. The leaves, we call them pencas in Spanish. This is the nursery at a really, really well-known brand called Real Minero. Real Minero is extremely popular among mezcal aficionados. They do extremely high-quality mezcal. They distill in clay, which I'll show you guys in a little bit. But here's some good examples right here. Look how tall and straight this agave is. This is the Karwinski species, so they look completely different. There's just so much diversity. There's some smaller ones back here. You got some round ones. So tequila versus mezcal, kind of the differences, a lot of it has to do with the species that you use to actually create spirit. These essentially look like logs, right? You shave them, you kind of shave them all down and you cook them. And contrary to the agave with tequila, which were round balls, these are basically like logs. This image is actually not 100% accurate. There's some names and some dates that are thrown off, but I wanted to throw this in here just to give you guys an idea of just the reference of size. So here's a dog up here at the top. Espadín is by far the most common species of agave used to make mezcal. Look how small that dog is next to that plant. Conversely, you have jabalí, you have tobala, and the dogs are about the same size as the plant. So there's a lot of different sizes and shapes, much different variety of species that you can use. One of the biggest things that separates tequila from mezcal is tequila is always cooked in ovens of some sort. We saw the clay ovens, we saw the autoclaves. Traditional mezcal is cooked in these underground earth pits where you heat these rocks, they get extremely hot. You might put a layer to protect the agave from the actual source of heat. You pile in all the agave. Sometimes you can mix them. You don't have to cook just one species at a time. A lot of times they'll blend them, and that's okay. And then they just cover it and wait for it to be completely done. Another couple of examples. This is at Real Minero. So they have the luxury of things like walls and doors, which is pretty cool, right? They're lucky they got walls and doors. Versus, this is right outside of Puebla. This poor guy basically got a hole in the ground. He's got to heat it himself. And I don't know where he found those stainless steel parts of metal, but you kind of get to understand how rustic this is and how little materials you actually need to create mezcal. This was probably one of the coolest experiences that I've ever had. And this, I think, illustrates just how much work goes into making mezcal, and I hope that it kind of sends the message of just how labor intensive, how much work goes into it, and why it should, like, it deserves to be not cheap. Like, there's so much effort that goes into this. You think about, so with tequila, you wait about 8 years for that plant to mature. There are some species of agave and mezcal, on average, they take about 12 years to mature. There's some species that take 25. There's one that we know of that took 55 years. It's a huge time commitment. And then on top of that, it's a very manual process. This bat here is made out of wood. It is extremely heavy. We're on a riverbank here. There's no electricity, there's no cell phone signal, there's nothing. These guys carved a wooden bat out of wood. They carved out this organized place to mash the agave. You don't have a tahona. You don't have a roller mill. It is all manual labor. You're basically beating it after you've cooked it to try to get it down to as small a piece as you can so that it can ferment properly. And even the guy my size, and every now and again I go to the gym on accident, like, that is heavy. It is extremely heavy. And you get these pieces right here, and that's kind of what you're left with. In tequila, they have these really cool and well-organized factories. These guys are out in the middle of nowhere on a river. They don't have wood. They don't have stainless steel. What they're fermenting in and what they turn into a tank is a cow hide. That is a cow hide right there. They have no other materials. They have what's around them, and they create a tank, and that's where they let this liquid ferment. Other places are a little bit more lucky. This is in Oaxaca. This is with a brand called Baco. I really like and recommend. Mexican pine is probably more the norm in Oaxaca. Some guys just layer a hole in the ground with cement, and that creates their tank. That's where they put in their water with their juice that they found a way to extract from the cooked agave, and that's where they let it ferment. It's extremely rustic. Some images again. So these are the piñas. They're cooked and they're fermenting in the cowhides. Here, they put a hole in the cowhide so you can pull that pin of wood and taste it, just make sure everything's going okay. And I wanted to include these pictures here just to kind of explain how dependent these people are on making sure that everything goes right. So you waited 12 years for this agave to mature. You put in a ton of effort to mash it. And then you're literally praying that the fermentation doesn't go bad. Like, there's a very small window in which it can go bad. And if it does, all of that was for nothing. So an internal view of what happens during distillation, you have to heat something and then cool it to get what it is you're looking for. So the tanks that I showed you in tequila, where they mash, where they combine the water with the agave juice and let it ferment, just like that 4-step process that I showed you guys. You put that liquid in a still, and oftentimes it's 2 clay pots. You have your bottom clay pot and you have your top clay pot. You boil it by applying heat to it, vapors rise. Up here is a copper pot. You run cold water to it, and just like what happens in the winter when it's really cold outside, you turn on your heater inside your house, on your window is a little bouts of condensation, the same exact thing happens. And that condensation then falls onto a little scoop, which is typically something carved out of wood. Sometimes it's just a leaf off of an agave plant, and that funnels the liquid out, and that's mezcal. Here's Hernandez, again, really, really well known. Extremely high-end, high quality mezcal. You got your fire. And here what's not visible is the first clay pot. Here's the second clay pot. You have the water going into that metal plate, and what's funneling out is the mezcal. Another example of a still, you have fire down here. First clay pot, cap it with this, which has a copper plate on top. And eventually through this system, it's funneled, and out this hose comes the mezcal. This is a copper example, which you can't see. It's got the fire down here. And another thing I want to point out is they do these things in batches. So this guy's name is Emilio. He's out in like literally the middle of nowhere in Oaxaca. He's been doing this for a long time. Luckily, he was one of the few that got discovered. You have to watch that fire all day long. Sometimes it's a 24, 36-hour process. Like, you literally cannot sleep through the night. You have to make sure the fire is at the right temperature. Because if you're getting too much mezcal, it's going too fast. If it starts to drip and separate, it's going too slow. So you have to pay a lot of attention to it. There's a lot of heat around. These guys are so ingenious. Like, you think you really want beer? These guys turn a riverbank into a distillation. That system. So this is the side of a riverbank. Down here, they carved into it so they can load the fire. Up here, they carved the hole so they can drop in the clay pot. Same thing. They're making mezcal in the middle of nowhere on the side of a riverbank. And lastly, I just want to touch on some of the, I think, spiritual and cultural elements that are very ingrained into mezcal. It's still very, very much small batch. It's still very, very much regional. One of the things that I find interesting is that when I go to Jalisco, I don't see a lot of mezcal. When I go to Oaxaca or Puebla, you see almost no tequila. It's a very, very defined environment. This guy here, kind of an altar that he built. I should have included a picture of him, but I didn't. This mezcal has been aging in glass for 27 years. This is some of the best mezcal he ever made. He loved it so much that he said, you guys cannot open this until the day that I die. And when I die, you can open it and you guys can celebrate with that. Cook underground. This guy's made barbacoa for us. Again, there's no kitchen, there's no ovens. Like, you gotta make do with what's out there. They just find a way to eat and get by. This is Judah Cooper. He owns a brand called Bago, which I love, recommend. Mezcal. We just had a great time to stay. It was about 92 degrees. It's extremely hot. And we already eaten, and his wife makes us this like chicken soup, and it's super hot. And we're like, do we really want to eat that? And it turned out to be one of the best meals that we ever had. Not so bad.